tell everybody a little bit about how Bonze lures actually got started, how I got started making lures. When I was a young fella, my parents moved up to the Bay of Islands from Auckland, and anyone that knows the Bay of Islands, it's the home of marlin fishing in New Zealand. I got taken out fishing with a couple of guys that I knew, and we had the most amazing day. I think we had 6 marlin bites, caught a couple of yellowfin, and I was hooked. Like, that was exactly what I wanted to do. So I was still at school. I think I was 15 at the time, and the guy I went with, he said, he made these lures, and I was very interested. I was like, I'd love to have a go at that. So I went back to school, and I told my tech teacher about it, and he said, well, you know what, mate? He says, you can do that as a school project. I said, yeah. He says, yep. So I did that as a school project. I made a lure, and I actually conned somebody into buying it from me for $20, one of the local charter boats. And he caught 111 kilo striped marlin on it the first day he ever used it. And that was how I got started. I knew nothing about making lures. I just made this lure, and they were made out of rod grips. The rod butt, and just shaped it up with some sandpaper on a lathe and stuck some skirts on it, put some lead in them, and what you see here is the humble beginnings of Bonze lures. And they were highly effective. They still are today. But technology's come a long way. I've learned a bit more, and the lures have evolved greatly, as you can see from that there. But what it did is it started a lifelong journey for me to where I am today. From making that one lure at high school, it led me to wanting to know more. And I started to make some resin lures. You'll see some of them here. Some of the early ones that I made. Made them for a lot of the charter boats here in Pai here. And then what happened was I decided, well, I really want to learn more about making lures and more about actually catching marlin on lures. And the ultimate place I could think of to go was Kona. As most people will know, Kona is the home of lure fishing. It's got arguably the best lure fishing conditions in the world. And the other thing it has blue marlin as the main target species. For me, that is the ultimate fish I want to catch. I want to catch blue marlin on lures. That's what spins my wheels, and that's what's been the driving force of my life, and I've been very lucky to be able to get to this point and be able to make lures as a full-time job. So I decided, well, hey, I need to go to Kona, and I'm going to go and learn from the best guys. And back in that days, the lure making was a really dark art. There was no YouTube, there was no Facebook or anything like that. So there was very, very little information on how to make lures. I just basically said, hey, I'm going to make lures, and I taught myself how to use resins and stuff like that. A lot of trial and error, a lot of heartache, but the first ones I made were very, very rough. So I went to Kona to try to learn from the very best people I knew of. So I bought a ticket and I went to Kona. I'd never been on an aeroplane in my life. I'd never been out of the country. So I jumped on this plane. I had enough money to last me a week. I had a credit card if it went wrong, and I had some nights booked in a hotel over there, so I had somewhere to stay when I first turned up. So that first morning, I got down to the harbour, and I was down there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there was only one captain on a boat that I saw. So I walked up to him, I said, I said, hey, how are you? He's going, good. He said, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm a Kiwi. And he said, oh, yeah. He says, I've got a mate of mine from New Zealand. I said, oh, yeah. He says, you might know him. I said, oh, well, maybe, mate. But I'm thinking to myself, man, there's 4 million people in New Zealand. It's not like I'm going to know him. So anyway, he mentions the guy's name, and I'm like, yeah, I know him. And he was a charter skipper from New Zealand. So he asked, would you like to come fishing with me? So I said, yep. yeah, I'd love to go fishing. Of course, that's what I'm here for. So he said, go and grab yourself a sandwich, come back down the boat and we'll go fishing. So off we went. I jumped on this boat, and the boat he only brought out 2 reels, like 2 rods and reels. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, one was a spinning rod with braid on it, and the other one was a 50 wide with braid on it. I'm like, I'm here to learn to catch blue marlin on lures with heavy tackle and that. Anyway, we went out of town. I wasn't questioning the guy, but I thought we were going to catch GTs and wahoos and that. But anyway, we went down of town in front of Kona there, and anyone who's fished Kona will know that you fish very, very close to shore there. It gets very deep very quickly, and you can see the boats from the shore fishing and catching fish in that. So anyway, we're down off the front of town, and we put a live bait out on straight piano wire with straight braid. And this is in the days, especially in New Zealand, that we never had seen that. It was very much in the infancy over in Kona as well. So it was from the San Diego long-range fleets that they'd started to use all this gear. So anyway, we went out, put a live bait out on the spinning reel, on the 50-pound straight braid, and he put it in the clip and we started trolling. Well, I didn't know what we were going to catch. Anyway, we're going for 2 or 3 hours, and all of a sudden, out of the clip comes the bait. Nothing said, and the angler goes across, and he's this big fella, big beard, chewing on a cigar. I'm like, well, check this fella out, and the captain's not exactly the most talkative guy either, but like they get this fish on and nothing's said, and we never set the hook on it, we never come tight on it or anything, we just start backing up. And we back up in this big arc, and I'd never been on a boat ride like this, never been in reverse like this on a boat in my life, and we're going as hard as this boat can go backwards in this big circle. Still never seen the fish, it never jumped or anything like that. And the skipper leaves the controls, he's driving from downstairs, as the boat's full rack reverse, as hard as it will go, comes across and taps me on the shoulder. He says, are you scared? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm scared. He goes, good. Gets back on the controls. He says, get your gloves on, mate. Get my gloves on. Up pops the leader. Like, we still hadn't come tight on this fish. We've just gone backwards on this thing for like 4 minutes in a big arc around it. And out pops the leader. He's like, grab hold of it, mate. I'll grab hold of it. Out jumps a 500-pound blue marlin and this crazy American skipper trying to back the boat under this fish. I'm like, oh, he's like, hold on to it, mate. I end up breaking the leader, snapping the fish off. I'm thinking, geez, that's my job gone. He comes across and gives me a big slap on the back and goes, how badass was that, mate? I was like, whoa. And that was the start of working for this guy for 4 years. Now, it turns out that the angler was Jack Nielsen, the owner of Accurate Reels, and what they were trying to do was see how strong their spinning reel was. So they thought, okay, what's the best fish the fastest, the hardest fighting fish we can catch with this reel? They said, that's a blue marlin, and that's what we're going to go and catch. So we did that for quite a while. I learned a lot about braid, tying it, different knots and stuff like that. But the big thing is, the skipper, I ended up working for 4 years. His name was Mike Rand, and the boat was Spellbound out of Kona. So I'm sure a number of you have been to Kona, would have seen the boat there. It's now called the Bite Me. Unfortunately, Mike passed away a few years ago. But the knowledge that I gained from him has put me in great stead, and he introduced me to a number of top skippers and other lure makers and that over in Kona. So I was very, very fortunate to work for him for a good number of years. We're lucky to have guys like, I got to fish with some great lure makers like Gary Eoff. Bart Miller was a mate of Mike's. He came on the boat a couple of times. Eric Rusnak, I fished with him. There was a couple of other guys that I fished with. And just in general, guys there know a lot about lure fishing. So if you ever want to learn about lure fishing, that is a great place to go and start. And it gave me a really good head start into the next few places that I got to go and fish, and it definitely gave me the knowledge to learn how to make lures a lot better as well. So after fishing with Mike for 4 years, I got an opportunity to go to a place called Cape Verde. Now, if anybody has heard of Cape Verde, it has the most amazing blue marlin fishing on the planet. May not have the most numbers, but it has consistently good numbers, but it consistently has big ones as well. So I got a chance to go across there, and I fished on a boat there called the Happy Hooker. Owner's called Bruno Niebuhr. It's called, won the World Cup twice. He's caught, I think, 13 granders, more than most people I think have ever heard of. So I was very, very fortunate to go across there. But there was a lot of challenges. Cape Verde is a very difficult place to fish, very rough. And with my English being my first language made it very difficult to communicate with a lot of the crews there. But I was very lucky. I got to fish in a place like that. I got to run the boat, run all the gear how I wanted to, and got to fish without fear, which I think was the big bit. I got to fish without fear because I knew there was going to be another fish soon, and I got to learn, and I got to try out so many different techniques, and I got to fish in a fleet that was very, very competitive. I was going to mention a few of their guys' names because it was so cool. Like, they were my idols. They're the guys that I read about in Marlin magazine, and I was getting to fish alongside them on a daily basis and watch what they were doing and try to do better than them, because that was always the deal each day. Fishing out of Cape Verde was to be the top boat. And fortunately, some days I was and some days I wasn't. But like guys like Zach Conde, incredible fisherman. And just a genuinely nice guy, super passionate about it. So, I mean, I love the banter that we've had. We've had a few good set twos, but that guy there, champion, great heart, and amazing fisherman. Probably one of the best fishermen I've ever seen in my life. Then there's a guy called Olaf Grimkowski. I spent a lot of time fishing with Olaf, been around the place, great thinker, and just a general good guy that's caught a bunch of fish around the place. And then there's the other boats that were there, but those two guys that I fished with that were there when I was there really stand out, and I got to learn a lot from those two guys. And the other after that, I got to meet a couple of guys that took me to other places like the Azores, where I got to fish with Les Gallagher, great captain, extremely technical guy, thinks about it a lot. I learned a lot about current and stuff like that, fishing with him and where the fish would be and stuff. Like, a great thinker and a great person at explaining that. And these guys have caught so many big ones. It's just, it's crazy. I always used to think that guys saying, oh, you know, I caught a 700, 800. Like, when I first turned up there and I went through, like, sat at the dock, and they're like, oh, yeah, we got an 800 today. And I was like, oh, that can't be that big. But in the Azores, that place is the land of the giants. So, I was lucky enough to go and fish there. And while I was there, I met a guy called Ian Carter, and I met a guy called Stephen Hall. Ian was the skipper of the Chakra and the owner, and Stephen was his deckhand scuba. What I learned off those guys was huge. I learned about drag management and about catching big ones quick from those two guys there. So I was very, very lucky to learn a lot of what I learned fishing with that crowd of people that I just mentioned there. So yeah, that's a little bit of the background of like my fishing. And then obviously once I finished fishing, I decided, well, I'm going to come back to New Zealand and I'm going to try to start to make some lures. And that's where I am now after 8 years of hard slog. I finally made it a full-time job, and I can make a living at it. But it's not easy. Like, I hope everyone appreciates when you buy a lure that comes out of this factory that I'm sitting in now, every one of them is made by me. I do have my helper Dave, and he does a share now, but I've only ever had the help in the last year. So so when you get a lure from me, it's made by me in this factory here in the Bay of Islands. So there's a lot of work that goes into a lure, and there's a lot of background of knowledge that's gone into the lure. So you're not just buying a lure, you're actually buying the fishing knowledge. So I always say, hey, I was a fisherman first, lure maker second. Now I'm a lure maker a lot more of the time because, hey, when you guys are out there catching fish, I'm busy in here making lures. But I miss the fishing badly. I'm lucky enough to have built a little boat behind me here that I can get out now and go fishing, enjoy it alongside you guys. So yeah, so that's a little bit of how I got started, a little bit of history of Bonze Lures and where it all came from.